Hello, and welcome to the Inner Bully Beatdown podcast. I am your host, Brittany Fowler. I am also the author of the book, Inner Bully Beatdown. I am also a breakthrough mentor and motivational speaker. So if you would like me to come speak to you, please visit my website at brittanyfowler.com. Enjoy this podcast. All right, listeners, I have a treat for you today. We are talking about suicide awareness and prevention with Lark Galley. I've known Lark for about a year and a half now. We've just been acquaintances on Facebook and through some different marketing seminars that we've been to. And when I've always looked up to Lark because she's like, in my mind, it was always like this epitome of success. Like, her house is beautiful. She has like the office I want. And so, you know, we always view other people as having the grass is greener on the other side, but yet tragedy can really strike to anyone and affect anyone. So and also in my family, we have a few people who have had suicidal thoughts and are watching them closely. So this hits close to home, and it's something that I feel like our viewers and our listeners would enjoy and also find value in. So I want to welcome Lark Galley. She's been a corporate woman like most of her life, just really, really successful saleswoman, marketing, just somebody that you would want to take business advice from, right? And she's just excellent at networking. And so she is here to share her message with us. So go ahead, Lark, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks. So Brittany, I appreciate this opportunity because I really do feel like I have a calling and I want to share this message. So as we had talked earlier, right up until just 13 weeks ago, I had been doing business coaching. I own a couple of my own businesses. I call myself a serial entrepreneur. My husband and I just launched another business just a few months ago because, you know, we each have two are separate. So why not have one together? It's just, you know, one of these things that we keep creating. And I thought that would be my future life for the next 20 plus years is just, you know, business coaching and helping people organize their time so that they can have more time with their families, because I think that's important. That's why I'm in business for myself, so that I can have the flexibility, kind of freedom to do what I want. And 13 weeks ago, my whole take on life completely changed, a 180. And that was when my son died by suicide. And it was overwhelming, shocking, just emotionally distraught. Our family was just, you know, completely devastated because we had no signs, which, you know, sometimes you think, oh, they committed suicide, you know, they must have been depressed or they must have been having problems or this or that. If you had known him, you wouldn't have thought that. He was happy. He was outgoing. He had friends. He had hobbies. He was a freshman at the University of Utah in the mechanical engineering department, which he had wanted to do since he was 6 years old. And so none of what we typically think are signs of suicide, like depression or sadness or isolation. And that's what really shocked us. And so it's been hard. And as it happened, you know, the first 2 days we were overwhelmed. We had to deal with the police and the bio crew. He actually took his life here at home. And so several different things like that, and just overwhelming grief. And there was no way I was going to talk about this. There's the stigma around suicide and mental wellness and all of the things that go with that. It was just like too overwhelming for me. So on Saturday, he died on Thursday, and on Saturday I posted that our son passed away, and that's where I left it. And then I started getting phone calls from my friends with teenagers who knew my son. And they would say, you know, my daughter took a bottle of pills last year and we caught her in time, but she was in the hospital for a week. We almost lost her, and we are having to watch her all the time. She's very, you know, depressed. And then another woman called me and said, my son is really depressed. When I told him about your son, it was just more than he could take. And we've already been worried about him. And now this just compounds it. Another friend called me up and said that I have my son. He's out of state at college. I said, get on an airplane and come home now. She wouldn't even tell him why. She just said, come home now. Because they were so close, she knew that as soon as he found out, he had been experiencing depression, and that could maybe kick him over. So over and over, I was getting calls from moms who their kids either knew my son or they were just concerned about their son. They had heard about my son through, their friends and family. And one woman said, I have a teenage boy. He's on 24/7 suicide watch here at the house. I am scared to death what will happen. And so over the next few days, as I'm getting these phone calls, I just felt inside me, I realized that this suicide was not a reflection of me as a parent, because so many times we look at what our kids do and we say, it's a reflection of me. Well, it's not necessarily a reflection of you if your child does something outspoken or they do something different. And I realized it wasn't a reflection of my son or anything else. It was the opportunity to help other kids, because my concern was copycat, which happens so often with kids. One person does it and then the next kid thinks, well, they did, I'm going to do it too. And I realized that I can't change what my son did. And I can't change if another child takes their life. What can I change? I can only change one thing, and that's myself. And so on that Tuesday, not even a week after my son died, I decided that something good was going to come out of this terrible event. And I was going to speak up and let people know what was going on, and to talk to their children and to make it a safe place, and to let them know it doesn't matter what you do or what you say or how you feel, I'm going to support you and I love you. And that's all we can do as parents. So I started and I haven't stopped.
Awesome. It takes a lot of courage to speak out about things that, oh, how's this going to make me look, right? Like getting past that first hurdle of it's not about me, it's about other people, I think is a huge step in not only confidence, but courage. And ultimately that desire to help other people, I know, is what drives you now. And to take your life from going from business training and coaching and, you're a mover and a shaker to wait, now I have this other calling, like now I have this other thing. Like, what are the challenges that you have faced in the past 13 weeks of switching gears, of following your heart's calling, and this calling from your higher power? What has that been like?
So I really feel like God has called me. I mean, it's this thing inside that I can't stop talking about it. Sometimes my husband is like, could you please not talk to every stranger you see, or not lead out with, hey, I'm sorry, did you hear that my son passed away? He's just like mortified. And I'm like, I can't stop. People need to know that this is happening. It's the number one killer of youth in Utah. It's happening across the nation. And as a parent, I think we try to be good parents. And I had no idea about this whole suicide thing, how prevalent it was. It's an epidemic. If I had known this, I would have taken the time to talk to my children more about it. And I think as parents, we want to do that. So as I've been, these past few years, I've been working on business coaching items and all of these programs. And so for the last couple months, I've been thinking, oh, I can do both. I can still hang on to what I've been doing in the past and still do that, and then create all these new programs and help people and all this other thing in this new direction. And finally, last week, I just said, I'm letting it go. It wasn't working. Holding on to both wasn't working. And I actually really had no desire to continue to promote, to create all these new business programs. I said, I have the information. It's all ready to go, but I just have no desire to continue to promote this. And so it was a personal change for me, being willing to let go. I mean, think about that. We do things and there are babies and we hang on to them and we hold on so tightly, but sometimes we have to let go. And I finally was able to release that. And I actually felt good about it. And some people that were in these programs that I was creating, I called them up and I said, okay, here's the deal. My son passed away. You bought this program from me and I don't want to do it. So here's some choices. I can refund your money. I can, one-on-one business coaching, or I can move you into a new program that I'm putting together that, rather than focus on external things around business, we're going to focus on the inside, about raising our value, finding balance and fulfillment in all areas of our life, and fixing what's wrong inside, so that then once that's done, we can just accelerate our growth on the outside. And I've had really good positive response from my clients, because I think they realize the power of what I'm teaching. And it's just that my message is in such alignment. It just sank right into my core. As soon as I figured it out, it was amazing.
Everything aligned. Everything aligned. I love that. And it took a little while, right? It always does.
Yes, because
It
I
always
was holding so tightly. I'm like, no, 2 years of my life's work. No.
holding so tightly, but yet greater things await.
Well, this
Um,
is what's been interesting is that, as I've been going out talking about business coaching, and it almost felt like I was pushing a river that, just people were interested, but not always committed, like that type of thing. And now that I have fully vested myself into what I feel is my mission from God, it's like I'm on this raft in this river, and I'm not even rowing. I'm just like going down a level 5 rapids. Doors are opening. People are saying, let me help you. Let me do this. Let me do that. That's how you know it's from God. And that's how you know it's your mission, because you are just being propelled. All of these things that are coming to me, I told God in the beginning, I'm like, I will say whatever you want me to say, but I don't know anything about this mental wellness field as far as like, I'm not a technician. I don't have a degree. I'm not any of that. I'm just a concerned mom. And so you have to help me. And he has been.
awesome. I love that. Um, I guess going along the lines of, as a concerned mom, I know there are other concerned moms that are listening. And before, when you had started, you had said, there were no warning signs. Had he ever had thoughts of suicide? Had he ever expressed suicide? And what other signs can parents watch for? Because, yeah, talk about that.
Okay. So, he had 3.5 years ago before he died. He was feeling some pressure. Once again, my husband was having that parent discussion with him and kind of figures things out. My husband's in the military, and he could tell from signs. My son started to detach his eyes, kind of detach from the conversation. And maybe there were a few other things. He noticed some signs in my son that he had been schooled on. And he specifically said, are you feeling suicidal? Are you wanting to kill yourself? And that's key. You have to use those strong, strong words, because people think, oh, if I say the word, then they're going to do it. No, you need to use the hard words, because what if you said, oh, are you going to hurt yourself? And maybe they're thinking, well, I'm already hurting right now. So no, this is actually not going to hurt myself. You have to use the hard words. And he asked my son, are you feeling like you want to kill yourself? Are you feeling suicidal? This was on a Sunday evening, and my son said yes. So my husband came and told me, and I kind of watched my son while my husband got on the phone. There are military resources that he has access to that he was able to call, and Suicide Watch, and we got him into a therapist the next day. And as we're in the therapist, I'm waiting in the hall, he's talking to her, and then I come in at the end, and the therapist said to my son, do you want to tell your mom or should I? And my son says, no, I'll tell her. And so he was 15, almost 16 at the time, and it was in the fallish, late summer. School was just about to start right in that time period. And he said, Mom, I don't believe in God. I believe in science. And he's like waiting for this big eruption from me. And I said, okay, son, well, good for you. I believe God is science, but you run with that belief, and good luck with that. And he kind of looked at me very shocked, and he's thinking that I'm going to have this explosion. And I just said, what? I can't make you believe anything. So, you do your thing. And I think he was afraid to say this because he didn't know how my reaction and my husband's reaction would be. And I just have to say, what if he had said, hey, mom and dad, I'm gay, or hey, mom and dad, I got a kid, a woman pregnant, a girl pregnant. What if he had said something like that? How would I have reacted? And it's so important as parents that we have to have our children understand it doesn't matter what they say or do. Nothing is irreparable. You are there to support and help them and love them and create a safe place. And I was actually a little bit sad that he didn't feel like he could say that to me, just without the counselor there. So he had about 3 months of counseling, created a safe plan. And at the end of all that, he said, no, I'm good. I don't need to go to counseling anymore. I'm fine. And so we stopped. That was 3 years before he died is when he stopped. And then, we all got up one morning and he didn't. And so as I've tried to look into this and figure out what happened, why didn't we see the signs? He said he was okay. What happened? And one therapist said that what happens is that with suicide cases, it's a journey. It's not a decision. You know, it wasn't just like one day he suddenly decided, boom, I'm going to, take my life right now. It was a decision. It was this process that had been going on for 3.5 years in his mind. And so people that are feeling, depressed, they get into this, they're hurting. It's like a physical pain inside. And I've actually been in that state. And I think several people have, a lot of people are, it's more than just feeling sad for the day or down. They are feeling like a physical pain. And then they just want the pain to stop, and they don't care how it stops. And the idea is, hey, I'm going to kill myself so that I can get this pain to stop. And they're horrified by the thought that they're thinking of killing themselves. And so because they're horrified, they don't want to talk to other people about it, because then you'll be horrified that they're such a terrible person because they're thinking about it. And so that's one of the reasons we have to use the hard language, but we also need to create a safe space so that they feel safe coming and telling us these thoughts. And then what happens is they create a plan of how they're going to end their lives. And once they create that plan, then they're happy, they're fine. And so for 3 years, my son has been happy and fine in our eyes because he had a plan. And he knew that if things got too hard, he could just check out. And what had happened the night before, actually the same night, so he died like early hours of on a Thursday, but the Wednesday night he had come home late from school. My husband was there and felt like he needed to have a parental conversation, actions, consequences. And it was nothing out of line that, a concerned parent wouldn't say about things that have been going on, but it just not at night is what I told my husband. Nothing good can come about having these conversations at 11 p.m. But my son had been in a car accident the week before. That combined with two other speeding tickets, 19-year-old boy, sports car, what could go wrong, right? Well, he was going to lose his license. And we did get a call or a letter the next week from the DMV that, yes, he had lost his license. So, that's devastating for that age group. And then his grades had been slipping a little bit. He was feeling just some pressure. And I think he'd felt like he let his father down. He looks up to his dad. And I think he just decided, hey, it's time to implement the plan. And that's heartbreaking. And you can imagine how my husband feels about it, thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm the one that triggered this. And I just said to him, nothing you said was out of line other than please don't have these conversations in the middle of the night. That's not never a good thing. But he could have done it in a month. He could have done it in a year. We don't know what happened earlier in the day. We don't know. And it just takes one thing. And then they just decide to execute the plan. And so it's heartbreaking. And I regret that we didn't know. And that's the thing that's scary as a parent is how do you know how to, make sure you're kind of pushing your kid and helping them live up to their abilities and yet not pushing them so hard that they go over the edge. That's a fine line we walk as parents.
Wow. That brings up a question, how do you know? Because you had 3 years of normal, happy teenage life, it sounded like.
Yep.
But he had an exit plan, and I guess when you have an exit plan, I don't know if, and maybe you can shed some light on this if you do know, but do they write it down? Do they keep it in their head? Do they tell somebody? Is it something that a parent could ask about or stumble upon? Because it sounds like that happy doesn't mean that they're cured, right?
No, not at all.
A journey, like you're saying. So,
yeah. In looking back, I wish that maybe we had more conversations instead of just taking his, "Hey, I'm good," at face value. I wish I could have had more conversations with him, kind of touched base with him over time and said, really, what's going on? The one thing that gives me hope is and just so you know, this was a child that was a very difficult child for me. He and my husband, they were best buddies, but for me, he was a difficult child. He loved to argue with mom and anything, that, hey, let's get your jobs done. And it was 20 minutes of arguing about why he should not have to do his jobs that would have taken him 5 minutes. I mean, this was my life since he was tiny, just the arguing, and it was exhausting. I was taking classes and courses and reading books. literally right up until the day he died. I was trying to improve that relationship. So, I wasn't perfect, but I feel like I was vested in being a good parent to him. And then something that happened is, as he was a freshman in college living at home, we kind of came to a little bit of a better understanding in that he stepped it up slightly. I pulled back slightly, and we were kind of at a happy medium. Neither one of us were completely happy with the situation, but we were in a better place. And so for the last 6 months, our relationship had improved. And then I read the book that you mentioned in one of your earlier podcasts about Greg Bear, on Real Love. And that changed everything about how I looked at my relationships with other people, and specifically my children. And that book allowed me to have private conversations with each of my kids. So 2 weeks before my son died, he and I went to dinner, and he talked to me for an hour. And this is the boy that wouldn't talk 5 minutes to mom. And now he's talking to me, and he's telling me, we're having this open conversation. What could mom and dad have done differently? What would you have liked, etc. And he's telling me things and expressing himself. And I kind of ended the conversation and said, well, son, mom and dad love you. We always try to do the best. Parents are not perfect, but they try to do the best they know. And maybe we could have done something differently, but we love you and we want to help you. And I look back on that and think, what if I had stopped trying? What if I hadn't continued to try to develop that relationship? It would have been so devastating to me to look back and say, wow, that I can never reverse that. And I feel at least, we had come to a much better place in our relationship. And so I am very grateful for that.
Yeah, you bring up the point of, I love that story where you're like, well, I don't regret that, because I think when something tragic happens, or, there's something in our life where we think, oh, maybe I could have stopped it. Like my sister, she married a man who was abusive and haven't seen her in 20 years. And we all, like, when she does come up in conversation, we just, sorry, I'm getting a little teary-eyed, but we all just kind of say, well, that was a sign. That was a red flag. We should have said something. But how do you know, right? In the thick of it, you just don't know. And you can't get that time back, but you can move forward. So I guess my question to you next is, we're all going to have regrets. We're going to do our best not to. But how do you not dwell on those regrets?
Right. So as I've been going through this process, I've had a lot of friends who have helped me and made suggestions about, different maybe books I could read or different things I could do, or and just I have a lot of friends in the coaching world, so they each like stepped in and said, I'm giving you a session, come over, and that really helped, and the support I felt was great. One book that was absolutely phenomenal is called The Grief Recovery Handbook. And it's not just for death. It's, we go through grief all the time, whether it could be we graduate from high school or college and we're changing. It's kind of sad in some ways. We're kind of sad that we're moving on. Maybe we're moving, or maybe our last child moved out of the house and we're empty nesters. There are many things that we can go through in grief, like a divorce. So what it taught me was that this word guilt that we throw around, the definition of guilt is actually with the intent to harm. Most of us have had no intent to harm someone else. So for me to say, I feel guilty about my son's death, that's not the right word. I regret things. I wish things could have been better. I wish things could have been different. And so there's that. And I did write my son a letter that I put in his coffin, and you don't necessarily have to put it there, but you can just write a letter. And I told him about all the things that I regretted, or I felt sad about, or I wished could have been different. And then when I finished my letter, then I sat there for a bit and I let him answer me and give his part of the letter so that I could hear what he had to tell me and write those down. And so be able to kind of put the emotions and the feelings out there and realize it's not guilt. It's, I wish things could have been different. And maybe what I would have changed, and implement that with my other children, with other relationships that I have, so that I'm a very different person now. This grief can affect you on a cellular level. I hug people now all the time. And 13 weeks ago, it's like, I don't really want to touch anybody. I'm hugging people. I'm sharing more love. I'm easier to compliment people if I see something that about them. Don't hold it inside. I'm just feel like I want to express more and tell people that they matter and they're important and I appreciate them. And that's something that I've tried to do now.
I love that. And I know part of your mission now is not only in the business world, but in every relationship, trying to get them to understand or recognize their worth. And in a lot of my podcasts, I talk about choosing to have confidence, choosing to have courage, choosing to just not believe the lies that you tell yourself, because a lot of it's a choice. But I guess my question to you is, for a person struggling to recognize their worth, what tips or processes would you suggest?
So my key word that since this has happened is the word decide, because like you said, choose, you can choose. I have decided that this event, and everything is an event in our lives. It's not good or bad. It's the meaning we assign to it. I have decided that my son's death will have good meaning, that something good will come of this. And so I actually feel him close to me, helping me share this message. And I would even say that from some experiences that I've had after his death, that we're closer now than we were before. And I know he's not in the same mindset that he was when he died. And so I feel that this is something he wants other people to understand. And so often we go through and we think, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough. We try to achieve all these things, and it's never enough, because our value isn't outside ourselves. Our value is inside ourselves. Our value exists because we exist. And if you think of a baby that you love, and think of that baby and how much joy that baby brings, that baby doesn't do anything for you. That baby's not, paying you money or giving you anything other than just joy. You are just happy that that baby showed up. And that's the kind of thing, the value that we each bring to the table is we just show up, and our just showing up is enough for us to have value. And that's important. And then the other thing I think about is over the course of my life, I've had two different mentors who changed my life, who affected me in profound ways. And both of them admitted to having suicidal ideation years before, to the point where they came up with a plan of how they were going to end it all. And they came very close to doing that. And I think, what if they had followed through on that? They wouldn't have been around when years later, their message impacted my life and changed me and affected me so profoundly that I was able to move forward in quantum leaps. And so I tell people, I know that you might be hurting. There's ways to get help for that, all of that. But you are that person for someone else. It's important that you stick around, because somebody needs you and needs the message that you have. And that's why it's so important, because you matter and people need you.
I love that. I know sometimes I look back on my life and I go, in the moment, I'm like, why did I experience that? That was terrible. There was nothing good that came out of that. And now years later, as I, write my book and I do my podcast and I speak in front of you, I can share those stories. And every time I share something gut-wrenching that happened to me, they go, somebody will always respond back like, oh my gosh, like that story just hit home. And if I hadn't experienced that, right, that wouldn't happen. And you're right, like just stick around to be that person, because you never know when you will be called upon. So I love that. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and we'll wrap up the interview. Just talking about, first I want to talk about the effects that it kind of had on your family, and then go into more, okay, what can other people do to not only spot, but help prevent suicide, either in their own family or those that they know, tools and applicable, valuable things they can do there.
Okay, so if I don't remember about the tools, just make sure you bring that up, because that's important. So very interesting. After the first few days after this happened, I have an adult daughter. She came home for a few days just to be with us. We had a senior at the time. She's now just graduated, and she was living here at home. And then we have a son in a different state, and he came here to Utah for one of the funerals. We had a funeral here, and then we took our son's body to New Orleans, where my husband is from, and buried him in a tomb there. So that whole funeral process lasted for over a week. It was just, that was so emotionally just exhausting. What was interesting is that, you go through the first 3 days and you're like, oh, I love everybody, I'll never get angry with anybody in my family again. And by day 4, we were going to kill each other, because these emotions that we're on, and people are experiencing grief in different ways. And the past 3 months, I've literally had to hold space and help our family manage this. My older daughter, who has a career, wants to chuck it all and move to the wilderness. And I'm like, you have a mortgage. What are you thinking? Right? Because she's just so distraught about this. My husband, barely, functioning at times with his work and just trying to make it through. And then my younger daughter, who won't talk about it at all. She's furious. And I'm thinking, until you talk about this, you're not going to get through it. And I've tried to initiate it a few times and she's pushed back, and I've just had to realize that she's just going to have to come to that on her own. So it's these different levels that of the grief process. And feel like I'm farther along, and I'm farther along in this process because of things that have happened earlier in my life, terrible things that, I was in grief and denial. My father died 5.5 years ago, and he was in a car accident, but that's not what killed him. He actually pulled out his gun and shot himself. He was, bipolar, and that was it. I couldn't talk about the fact that it was a suicide. I just couldn't even go there. And so now that, and I went through 5 months of depression and just so much sadness around it because I wouldn't talk about it. And I feel like because I'm talking about my son's death, I'm talking about my father's death, I'm able to heal from both of those events because this is what happened. I'm accepting it as a reality and saying, let's talk about it. Let's find some way to make these things a help in people's lives so they don't have to go through it. So it has been incredibly exhausting, the aftermath with trying to hold it together for our family. You hear about these things, that tragedy happens and families fall apart, marriages fall apart. And you're like, well, why? Because people go into the blame game, and that will kill it. And so we've just had to take the blame off the table. It's it's not your fault. There is no blame assigned here. And we cannot even go there. I can't even tell you how important that is. So taking the blame off. And then with regards to how to spot it, I have been listening to, podcasts and taking classes and reading books and lots of different resources. And one therapist was saying that, there are basically 3 keys in helping to prevent suicide. And that's creating a community. That's huge. A community of people, whether just a group of people where they're like-minded and they're supportive. Another thing is, does that person belong? Which is why we see a lot of people on the fringes of society. They don't feel like they belong. And I can remember my father often isolating himself, which is when you're depressed. I've been that way, when you're seriously depressed, you think the answer is to isolate yourself, but it's actually the opposite. And my father could barely be at family functions on Christmas and Thanksgiving because he just he sort of wanted to be there, but he just felt he couldn't. So he'd isolate himself. And then the third thing I will have to think of, because I just forgot it, but I will think on that. So.
No worries. I'm sure it'll pop back into your head as soon as our interview is done.
Yes, of course.
Oh, goodness. So let's talk about the tools for a second. I guess since, of course, my podcast is the Inner Bully Beatdown program, this will kind of segue into that. But what inner bullies do you think a person who is contemplating suicide might have?
Mm-hmm. I think it comes back to, I'm not good enough. I can't do it. Everybody's better than me. What's the point? I'm, just that lack of value inside of feeling like they have worth, and other people ganging up on them. That's tragic. I've heard of some things in the news where one female was telling another boy, you should just kill yourself, and just egging him on. I'm like, who does that? Right? That's just crazy. So it's important that we, ourselves feed ourselves with, hey, I am good enough. I can do this. Make sure we talk with our kids There's another thing that I've learned about recently. It's called Safe UT app, and I was doing some volunteering at a booth just this last weekend. It's specifically for students, funded by the Utah State Legislature, students, parents, and teachers, but anyone can use it, and it's 24/7 anonymous crisis line. You can text, talk with a counselor, and just get some insight. Hey, kids wake up in the night and they're there with their thoughts about how they're not good enough, and they can just text and say, hey, I just need some help. Or as a parent, we can say, okay, is this normal? Is this not normal? My kid's doing this. We can text in. And so that's just an app you can have on your phone as a resource. It's important to know what resources are available. So Safe UT app. And just creating a safe space with the kids, having conversations. And this is so important. So many of my friends have said, thank you for letting me know about this information. We had a conversation with our child. Help them to know that if they're feeling these feelings, come and talk to us. We can help you. We want to help you. And then as parents, we have to follow through and making sure we know the kids feel it's safe, and that we're not judging them for coming to us and telling us of these feelings that they're having.
I love that. I love that app is for teens and adults.
Yep.
I know as adults we have more questions than probably the teen does. But it is, I think, as I've had teenagers go through my mentoring course for Inner Bully Beatdown, before I started that, I had a lot of feedback from teenagers say, well, I don't want my parents involved. I don't want my parents knowing my thoughts. It's embarrassing. And so I've tried to create a safe space where they can share their journal, their writings, their, all the activities that we do in there with me and or my helpers, because getting it out, I think, is a huge stress relief. Not that it goes away, but getting your thoughts out of your head onto paper is a huge stress relief, and what to do next. So,
and I found that to be the case as well. I journal a lot. You just get out all that negativity. And that's why I think it's so important. No kid, think about yourself when you were a preteen and a teen. Your parent comes to me and says, honey, tell me all your deepest, darkest, scary thoughts. And you're like, yeah, that's never going to happen. It starts with the parents. Hey, when I was your age, I know that I struggled with some things, and I struggled with blah, blah, blah. I'm here to help you. It was difficult for me, and I'd love to support you in, any way. Or going and saying, this is what's happening. This is a reality. Kids are turning to suicide because they don't know that there's any other way. And if you ever feel dark feelings, or you just thinking that, please come and talk to me. I am here for you. And having those conversations more than once.
Yes, having those conversations more than once. And I do have a few friends who have started, even though their kids are a younger age, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Guess how young it's happening. Suicide in Utah, 9 years old.
For that young.
Yep, that young.
Well, it's good that they're starting now then. But in addition to conversations, they have like a swap journal where the child can write the parents a message, and then the parents write something back, because it's not always easy to talk out your feelings. And especially for children, even 9, 10, 11, 12, even, as adults, we struggle to know
Yes.
what emotions we're feeling and how to get them out. And it seems like on paper, we can often express ourselves much better on paper. So I just wanted to put that out there for our listeners that, start that communication, however it's comfortable with your loved ones. So
Exactly.
anything else that I have missed that you feel like your heart is dying to share?
It's just super important that we talk about it. Statistically speaking, if you have not been impacted by suicide, you will be. It's like I said, it's the number one killer of our youth in Utah. It's the 10th largest killer nationwide. And to me, it's an epidemic. And there are so many things involved. It's not one thing that you can point to and say, oh, that's it. That's not the way it is. There are multiple factors that contribute to this. And so just creating a safe space, a community, a place where you feel like your children belong. And then if they've had tendencies that way, make sure you stay in touch with them. Don't assume, like my husband and I did, we went through that, but now we're over it and it's fine. Freshmen in college, are big ones, high statistic, and then your teenagers. And here's something else I learned, because I thought a lot of the suicide would happen in the winter months, right, when we get this lack of sun and it's dark and it's just not feeling, it doesn't feel good, it's cold. But the therapist actually said that's not when it happens. It usually happens in the spring, which is shocking because they've been feeling so terrible. And now the spring comes, it's starting to feel good. The sun's coming out. They're feeling a little bit better. And they're like, okay, I'm feeling good enough that I can go kill myself, which makes no logical sense. And that's the thing, is they are not in their right minds. And so you have to just understand that they are not thinking rationally, and not to judge them as a rational person, so to speak.
Well, thank you, Lark, for being on. I know that I'm going to get a lot of feedback from my listeners. They're going to love you. And thank you for sharing your message. And thank you for being vulnerable enough to share personal things related to your son and your father's death. So I just want to say thank you. And if anybody is interested in helping with suicide prevention, how can they do that?
You know what? Just make sure you have there's a national suicide number. Just Google it. Make sure I have it on my phone. I can, look it up, but just Google the national number and have it there. There's the Safe UT app, like I mentioned. That's a great resource for people to have. Look into the community and see what community events are. My friend started this foundation. It's called Golden Gate, that she's rolling it out into high schools in Utah. And actually it's going broader. Many schools across the nation have wanted to do it. It's a club for teaching kids soft skills, that they're not learning in schools, like, hey, how to be a friend, how to have a conversation, and all of these things that people are losing this disconnect, because it's staying connected with other people that's going to help us stay in the game. So there are things, and specifically if you have kids at school, find out from the schools what is going on, and just reach out to your family and the people that you might feel are on the fringes and not feeling like they belong.
Perfect. Thank you again, Lark. Have a wonderful day, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you. From the bottom of my heart to yours, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you can't get enough or need more support with terminating your inner bullies, please join us on Facebook at Inner Bully Beatdown Podcast. We hope to see you there. Have a great day.